Around Leeds, there are rumours of a list that exists deep in one of Victor Orta's many notebooks. On that list, there are a large number of players broken down per position on the football pitch, all of whom are potential replacements who can be brought in at Leeds United should the need arise. Hello and welcome to Orta's List, which is a new series on All Stats, aren't we? Which is, I've lost a new series on All Stats, aren't we? Which is dedicated to scouting footballers around the world in a bid to create our own version of Victor Orta's List. I'm John McKenzie, and I'll be joined throughout the series by All Stats, aren't we's very own Josh Hobbs, and Scouted Football and Leeds Live's own, but also a little bit our very own too, Joe Donahue. Joe, welcome to the show. Well, I've finally found the button which reveals everyone. How you doing, Joe?
I'm very good, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be on again. I'm looking forward to discussing some right-footed left midfielders or left forwards or whatever you want to describe it as.
And Josh Hobbs is here. How are you doing, Josh?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I enjoyed the little live mess up. We've not had that so far. We made it 4 episodes in before we did that.
I've got so many tabs open on my browser and I have to switch between them all. I just royally messed that one up. So yeah, maybe I'm getting a little bit complacent, but that will remind me to keep me on my toes. But just to lay out the format of these shows so you know what we're getting into, we're going to spend the next hour talking about right-footed left wingers, as Joe said. We'll be talking briefly about the position itself at first and what we're looking for from a left winger in a Marcelo Bielsa system, and then we'll reveal our 4 potential targets before profiling each one, and then we'll end the show by talking valuation and close by picking our best option in the position. And for those of you who are wondering, we're going to be using 5 Yards as our platform to scout and buy players. 5 Yards is an online transfer market for fans where you can prove you can spot talent, and their prices reflect nicely those of the current market. And so there are some that gives us a good idea of what we're looking at, and there are also some good scout reports on there too to help inform our decisions. So last time out we bought Emi Buendia for 28 million to go with the 26 we spent on Boubakary Soumaré and the 18 we spent on Romain Perrault, and this leaves us with 28.2 million to spend. So here's just a little summary of our squad so far. As you can see, we're picking up a nice little bit of performance pay there as well, and some of the players I think have gone up in value. And that's just to show you the money that we've got left. If you're interested in checking out 5 Yards, do head over to their website to find out a little bit more. Let's start with you, Josh. As always, do you want to give us just a sense of what it is that we are looking for in these curiously titled right-footed left wingers that we're talking about?
Yeah, I think we're trying to maybe mix it up a little bit with this, because basically the entire time that we've had Bielsa as manager, we've had someone left-footed on the left. So we started off in season 1 with Alioski as the left winger, and over time Harrison usurped him there, and he's basically been there ever since. Harrison's been really good this season and sort of steadily improved over his time, but we have 4 wingers in our squad, and all of them are left-footed. There is no one who could play on the left and drift inside, maybe be a bit more of a threat as a goal scorer from the left. That may be a tactical thing, but I feel that it would be something, it'd be a profile that could be added to this squad to just change up the attack at times. So we're looking specifically, obviously, for a right footer, because it can open up different angles in attacking phases, someone to come inside, they can weigh in with goals, they could maybe take a bit more responsibility in playmaking, as well as getting on the ball high up. Harrison tends to sort of stay very high and wide, whereas Rafinha does a lot of the drifting inside to create. It'd be interesting to see, could we have someone that could assist in that from the left as well? Maybe sort of with the attacking midfielder and Rafinha sort of all roaming a little bit. That might break from what Bielsa's tended to work with, but could be interesting. Looking for someone with a high level of ability in 1v1s, and can carry the ball a lot in transition. But yeah, the main thing is we want someone that can be a threat on the inside as well as the outside.
Cool. And I'll come to you first on this, Joe. What do you make of the way that Leeds play through their wide players in particular? Because obviously, as Josh has said, we've pretty much had Jack Harrison on that side, who is pretty much a classic winger in that sense, in that he looks to get isolated 1v1, looks to hit bylines and cross the ball in, doesn't really drift inside in the way that we're talking about here. And if he does sort of cut the ball back, it is from the byline and keeping it low. So do you think that there's scope for a player of this sort of approach, and how do you envisage that sort of working? Because we've seen for a long time, especially in the Championship, I think under Bielsa, that left-sided winger was essentially an outball. The build-up would happen in the right-hand side. The ball would get floated out to the left onto Harrison's foot. He would then take it down, try and go one-to-one against a fullback and try and create from there. In the Premier League, we're doing it quite differently. So I'm really interested in your thoughts on how a different profile of player in that slot might look.
Well, that was one of the things that I sort of had in my notes, was that, you know, any player who's going to play on that side, because of how Luke Ayling is, because of how Calvin Phillips is, you're going to need to be very good at receiving and distributing high balls. So I mean, I know that it's changed to an extent, but I don't see an incredible shift. However, I think you need to, if you're going to be a right-footed left winger, you obviously need that ability to come inside and to be comfortable in central spaces. I think one of the areas where Jack Harrison probably doesn't get enough plaudits is his defensive work rate, which is absolutely phenomenal for a player in his position. You know, he's in sort of the 90th and upwards percentile, so like the top 10% of players for tackles made, tackles in the defensive third, tackles in the attacking third, pressures, successful pressures. You know, he epitomizes the Leeds system. You know, nobody is getting away with not doing their defending. And I think that's something that we'll have to consider when we're picking these players.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's kick off as always, Josh, with you. Actually, no, we need to do the reveal, don't we? The big reveal, the thing that everyone tunes in for. So without further ado, here are the 4 players that we have picked that we're going to look at tonight. So we've got no surprises here. Ryan Kent, someone who, if you follow Josh, will have seen plenty of tweets and videos about Ryan Kent at Rangers. PSV's Cody. Now, how are we going to say this? It's technically a Dutch G, isn't it? So it's Hackbow or something like that. Depending on where you're from. If you're Belgian, it's Hackbow. So there you go. Plenty of language acquisition going on this podcast as always. Another interesting name, Werder Bremen's Milot Rashica. And then I guess another interesting name, Arnar Danjuma at Bournemouth. So these are the 4 players that we have picked, and we're going to talk about tonight. So let's kick off with Ryan Kent then, Josh, given that you've been dying to talk about him ever since we started this season.
Yeah, I have. You're right. He's probably, if I could choose just one player for us to sign this summer, I think it would be him. So I'm showing my hand in the first thing that I say. But anyway, so he's 24. He came through at Liverpool. He had a string of loans, sort of mostly underwhelming loans, to be honest, before he went to Rangers in 18-19. And he did really well there, encouraging them to buy him. So they spent 7 or 8 million pounds on him. I've forgotten the exact figure. But playing there, he's basically playing either on the left wing or as one of 2 10s. But when he plays as a 10, he's basically operating in very similar spaces to when he's a pure left winger, because when he's at 10, he tends to pull out wide quite a bit. When he's wide, he tends to come narrow. So he's got 10 goals and 9 assists in 3,440 minutes in all competitions this season. When you watch him, he is just a very high intensity player. He's so direct. that stands out straight away. Basically, when he gets the ball, his first thought is, how can I run towards the goal as quickly as possible, basically. So if he's receiving it back to goal, his first thought is, can I spin and take a man on? He does that thing that Rodrigo does, where if the ball's coming to him back to goal, he is turning as it comes to him. He wants to receive on the spin, probably on the outside of his foot, knock it around the player. If anyone saw the Rangers v Celtic game from the weekend, he just completely turned Scott Brown in the midfield, burned him, and then he got fouled, but they scored anyway. So he's a box of tricks. When he's dribbling, he tries a lot of step overs, drag backs. He takes lots of small touches when he's dribbling. So I think he's always sort of trying to unsettle the balance of his opponent, throw a body feint, and then as soon as they're committed, he's past them. I think he would be our best dribbler. That's probably a controversial take, because I think a lot of people are going to say, well, isn't Rafinha our best dribbler? But I think he's just got a little bit more. He's got a little bit more silk. I'm putting that out there. He loves a chop back, so he will go to the byline, feint to cross or shoot or whatever, and he will chop back. If you saw the goal that he scored on the day, I think it was the day before they won the title, he really gave it the big one of, I'm going to shoot here, and then he just chopped it back onto his left foot, which is his weaker foot, and shot into the corner from the edge of the box. And that's something that stands out with him, that he's really comfortable passing, shooting, and crossing with his left foot as well as his right foot, which I think makes him even better for me, because if it is a tactical thing in our system, which I think we all think that it is, that the left winger stays high and wide and goes down the line a lot, he would need to be able to do that as well as bring what he can bring inside. And I don't see him struggling with that at all, which is really important. I think maybe some of the other players are not as strong in that regard. He's really good in tight spaces. When he's surrounded, I think he always seems to manage to be able to shift it quickly. If he's in the box surrounded by a couple of players, he just always seems to be able to make a bit of space for himself to get a shot away. And speaking of shots, this is one of my issues. He takes a lot of long range shots. It's good to have a threat from outside the box. I think Stuart Dallas has been our main threat from outside the box this season, which, on people that have listened to All Stats Aren't We podcast before, that's something that we've criticised in the past, that he's quite wasteful, but this season he's pinging them in from all over the place. So it's nice to have that, but I think he's quite he can be quite one-track minded in that position. He's also a danger in behind as well as receiving to his feet, which I like as well. So he's varied in his game. He's not too one-dimensional. Joe mentioned about the defensive work rate. I don't think he's as natural as Harrison, but I think he puts a shift in off the ball. He works hard. That he's pressed up the pitch and won the ball for Rangers on a few occasions where they've ended up scoring. I don't know if he'd be used to tracking back as much as Harrison has to track back. That might be a little bit more of an issue. But I think the pressing up the pitch, he's got the intensity in his game for that. I think a criticism that would be perhaps levelled at him would be that he gives the ball away like loads. That with this kind of player, but I think he does it even more than most, because he's just so direct. he's looking to dribble all the time or play the final through ball so often that he can take a heavy touch, or he can play a pass when it wasn't really on, and he could have just kept the ball or played it back. And the other thing about him is that he can be inconsistent. So this season, he started like on fire for Rangers when they had a really fast start to the season. I mean, to be fair, they basically just powered through the whole season, but he was like the star man in the first couple of months, and then he sort of plateaued. But they had enough incredible players relative to the league to pull it through. But then he's finished the season really, really strongly. But he does always show up in the big games. So against Celtic, he always seems to score or assist. In the Europa League, he's put in a lot of big performances, title-winning game, so on. I wonder if playing in the bigger stage of the Premier League would sort of bring that out of him a bit more. And speaking of Celtic, there was a famous moment where he did punch Scott Brown in the face. So he's a bit fiery. So I think that's maybe something to just note about him. And the final thing that I'm going to say is that it could be difficult to attain him, being that Rangers have made it into the Champions League, or at least the qualifying round of the Champions League. So he might not want to move, but that, be interesting.
And we've got a quote here from 5 Yards.
That's
from
right.
One of the scouting reports. So did you want to talk us through that?
Yeah. So this guy, I wrote his name down. I've instantly forgotten it. William Weir. So he says that he's a big game player. He scored important goals for Celtic, and in Europe thrive with the pressure of playing for a club where you're expected to win every week. So that's what I was just saying. But that's what he sort of stood out for at Rangers, and why their fans absolutely love him, because they know when they've got a big game, he's going to be really up for it.
We did have a question as well from Kay Meacock, who says, any concerns about Kent making it look easy in the best squad in Scotland and the jump to the Premier League? I'll hand this over to you, Joe. How do you read that jump from the Scottish Premiership to the Premier League? Do you think that would be a potential issue?
Sorry, just to begin, Josh, did you say he went to Rangers in 1819?
I did. Was I wrong?
Well, I mean, it just seems like he's been there for quite a while. If it's been that long ago. Oh, that's fallen on deaf ears, unfortunately. I was talking about he's been there for about 200 years, but
oh no, yeah, that went completely over my head.
Completely over their heads. But no, in terms of big game, him being a big game player, yeah, he is. He's a very big game player. I think that was my immediate concern. The comment that we had there about making the step up. I think you can go from being in the best squad in Scotland, the best team who are dominating games, and I think you are going to look good, essentially. There are other players there like Yanis Hadji, who I'm very fond of, but hasn't done anywhere nearly as well as Ryan Kent. So there is a credence to say that he is actually doing well, even considering the circumstances. My only concern, well, I've got a few actually, is that you mentioned about his shots. A lot of them get blocked. And it's because I think they're not from good locations. And, I don't have any issue with players who take shots from outside the box. It's just that whenever he does take them from outside the area, a lot of the time they are getting blocked. And you think, well, in a team which is so transitional as Leeds, you're not going to immediately, a lot of the time you won't immediately recover the ball and reset and just go for another attack. You'll be on the other foot. You'll be going to do some defending. So you'd want good shot making decisions, which I think Jack Harrison does at the moment. And another thing I noticed in his numbers was that his dribbling, as in terms of his what's the word? The amount that he's dribbled over the years has gradually fallen. And I was just wondering, I mean, I know you're very fond of him, Josh, but is that to do with him making better decisions? Is he releasing the ball sooner, or has he plateaued in that respect? Because I think, I agree. I think he probably would be the best dribbler at Leeds. But I think when you come up against better, more intelligent opponents in the Premier League, as you do every single week, then you kind of have to be even sharper with your decision making. I think it's why we've seen Helder Costa struggle with in one-on-ones. A lot of people have said, well, he just won't beat a man, and I think that's because it's a reflection of how the league is. I think, yeah, he's always involved. He is a big game player. Does have that fiery streak, as you said, but I think for me, I'd need to have the concerns about the shot locations and the dribbling sort of clarified.
The shots thing is that's definitely there. I wrote about him in the Scouted Football Patreon, and that was something that I pointed out, that there were a lot of blocked shots from the edge of the box. I do wonder if that is partly the effects of Rangers and teams defending really deep, and there being plenty of bodies in the box. So that, I guess, that would partly allay that for me, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't make bad decisions in terms of shooting, because I think he does.
Do you not think that
it's valid?
One of those things that's quite easy to coach out of players, like shooting decisions? Like, I guess if we were talking about something which is maybe a little bit more technical, or something to do with the physicality or athleticism, you'd have more concerns. Like for me, just a player who shoots too much, you just say to them, let's think about where you're shooting from. Let's shoot less if we think that you're less likely to score from there. And it's something which is overcome quite easily, is it not?
Well, I think that, yes, but at the same time, you will always have players who get into a position, and no matter how well they've been coached, there has to be that conscious decision every time to say, no, I need to pass instead of taking this shot on. No, I need to reset, start again. And I think I don't know Ryan Kent personally. I haven't watched him from, the beginning of his career when he was with Liverpool. I couldn't tell you what his sort of mentality is, apart from that he does always seem to turn up in those big games. So I think, yeah, it is one of those elements which is coachable, but surely after 3 years with Rangers, where, with Steven Gerrard, who, to be fair, did have his fair share of long shots. So maybe he hasn't been too discouraging in that regard. I think, yeah, I agree with I know what you're saying, but my concern is that if you're constantly taking shots that you're getting blocked and ricocheting into the middle, possibly behind the two number 8s who've pushed up to support, that's where I'm having concerns.
One final thing on Kent before we move on, because I am aware of time. We've talked a lot about how I think most of these players are players who'd like to come central. We've not really looked at, I don't think there's really any of these players that we're looking at tonight who are like classic wingers, in the sense that they're just going to hug the touchline. And I wondered if you could maybe touch on that as well, Josh, because it's almost like he plays as a second striker, he plays as a 10. How important do you think that adaptability and the flexibility is going to be as well? And we should touch on the dribbling as well that Joe talked about as well. So I'll hand this over to you. Yeah,
I mean, I think he could be also used as an attacking midfielder. I think there would be a bit of positional discipline that would need to happen there. But I think, yeah, he's definitely not a classic winger. But I think I like the idea of having someone who is, able to play, I guess, all along the line behind the striker. Really, I feel that he would do that really well. The dribbling thing. Yeah, I think it is a bit that he's maybe maturing in terms of knowing when to try and take someone on or not, or when to carry the ball or not. But I mean, it's still something that stands out when you watch him, that the first thought he has is, can I run with it? Can I dribble? And then you just see him sometimes think, oh, I've got to pass it. It's a bit like that. Like he definitely doesn't want to turn back if he doesn't have to. But I think, I think his decision making in knowing when to dribble is probably better than his decision making in knowing when to shoot.
Well, as I've said, I'm aware of time, so let's move on to the next player on our list, which is Cody Hackbow. And Joe, you're going to talk a little bit about him.
Yeah. An immense pronunciation, I think, for the Dutch listeners as well as the Belgians. I'm sure there's many, but yeah, Cody Hackbow, he's not burst onto the scene with PSV because I should say he's at PSV Eindhoven in the Netherlands. He's been coming. He's PSV through and through. He's been coming up through the club's academy for a while, and I think he's around 21, just about to turn 22 next month. And he's had a few injuries sort of before he began to fill out and really grow into his frame. And the reason that I like him as a potential is because, similar to Kent, in the same way that he can also essentially play as a second striker, I actually think he can double as a centre forward. He is an inside forward. He plays on the left, but all of his good stuff happens inside. He's got a real repertoire of finishes. But he, again, similarly to Ryan Kent, very good dribbler. He plays vertically, he plays directly. He's a real nuisance, I think, since he bulked up a little bit, which kind of came over the end of last season, at the beginning of this season. When he's really driving forward, cutting onto that right foot just outside the box. He does have that trademark finish, which is always something that I'm going to like about a player like that, especially when I'm thinking about them, whether they're going to sign for Leeds, because they are that's a player who is going to be very good in transition. And this season under Roger Schmidt at PSV, he's been quite tactically flexible with how he's used Hackbow, because he's been used as the left-sided midfielder in the penultimate line in a 4-2-2-2. Or as the supporting centre forward, or as the main centre forward. So he's quite versatile. I think if I was being very frugal, and I know that Victor Orta might not be, I'd say that I quite like Hackbow in the sense that he could probably double as a centre forward if, in the event that Patrick Bamford got a serious injury and a striker of Bamford's quality and work rate wasn't acquired in the summer. He's got very good feet. He's physical enough. I've got no doubts that he'd be up to the test for the Premier League. Very good at attacking transitions. Very good at going sort of either way up until he reaches the box. I just think, in terms of a player who starts wide, in terms of finishing, in terms of ball progression, spatial awareness, all those aspects, I think he is somebody who probably trumps most of the others in the list. I mean, he does have his nicks to his game. I'd be interested to see his defensive output at a more statistical level, because from the eye test, it's very much like he isn't really doing that much because he doesn't have to, given the sort of the circumstances of PSV and the Eredivisie. But his goal scoring has translated up through the gears from under 19s to under 21s to the first team, and I think in terms of winning duels, speed across the ground, the ability to finish confidently, which Harrison's got 7 goals this season. I think that's a fantastic return for a first season back. I think Cody Hackbow will be able to replicate that, I think, but it'll be interesting to see how he does against Premier League opponents.
I'm just looking at his data now, actually, and he looks pretty impressive in terms of the defensive side of things. He's got 7.9 high pressing actions per 90 this season, which is higher than Rafinha. I don't have Jack Harrison's to hand. I suspect Jack Harrison's may be slightly higher than that, but that's well above average for the top 5 leagues, so I don't think that would be an issue whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Josh, I'll come to you because you do a lot of scouting in the Eredivisie. You will no doubt have watched Hackbow. So what do you make of him?
Yeah, I at the top of my notes say the exact same thing that Joe sort of concentrated on there, which is that I put he could be an option to back up Bamford, and it's obvious to me that and he's by far the tallest out of any of these players. He's 6'2", I think, around that, and he's got a lot of running power. I think I can't remember which was it against, not Romania, in the under 21s.
Hungary, the last game when they won.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they just couldn't stop him.
Yeah,
but he was just coming in from the left and just running like a truck, like towards the goal, and he was just so physically dominant that they couldn't get near him. And I was thinking if he was having to do some of the back to goal work that Bamford has to do, I think he's got the frame to do that, and he's clearly got the ability to cover the ground and do the pressing. So yeah, I think that's a big tick for him. Maybe some of these others could fill in as an option as an attacking midfielder as well as a winger, but no one else can on this list for me can do the Bamford job. Only Hackbow. I think he's good at arriving in the box.
That's one
from
thing
crosses from the other side.
Yeah. That's very Like he always just seems to be at the far post when the ball is coming across. Which once you watch and watch and watch, it just becomes so apparent that he's always there. A lot of his goals come from that way.
Yeah, so that's something, and like you said, I like that he was sort of make an out to in run and shoot from the edge of the box, but not in that sort of situation where Kent might shoot, where it's like there's 5 players in front of you. He'll have got himself into a position where he's basically shooting just one-on-one with the keeper, but from the edge of the box. I had noted down that playing in a Roger Schmidt side, he should fit the intensity pretty well, and I think from my eye, he's got that intensity to press. And the other thing that I got down is I like that he makes a lot of angled crosses from the sort of the top corner of the box. He'll look to sort of clip it to the back post, and I think Rafinha attacks the back post quite a bit if the ball's coming from the other side. I could see that working quite nicely.
I also think on that point, sorry to jump in, John, I also think that perhaps having somebody who is a right footer on the left-hand side, in terms of crossing, would that be better for Bamford as well in the air? Because I feel like if you position yourself going towards the back post, Bamford's not somebody who's going to sort of meet the ball in the air, which is sort of an in-swinger, an outswinger, like an Andy Carroll back in the day. Whereas I think if it was an in-swinger, sort of just getting that glance, getting that touch on it, I think maybe more suited. That's just, I mean, that's not something which has any. That's actually really good. I've never thought of that. That's not something that I've given any sort of serious thought to. Just when Josh mentioned it there, I thought actually maybe that would be better suited. But I mean, who knows?
I can only think of the Sheffield United away goal this season where Bamford got a clear head-on goal from a Harrison cross in that. I mean, I'm sure there are others, but that one stands out because he scored it. But
it also feels as though when we do cross from that area, we usually use Alioski, and it's you build the ball up in that wide area, and then the ball's laid back to Alioski, who's got quite a good cross on him, and so that is always going to be a sort of outswinging cross into the back post. So it's definitely something that I was thinking of when I was scouting some of these players, just how much of a different option that ability to have a right-footed clip into the box can have in terms of an attacking option. And I think part of the problem is that on that left-hand side, because everyone who's pretty much there is, I guess, with the exception of when either Dallas or Click ends up crossing from that area, but I don't think either of those two are necessarily as good at crossing. It's always coming from a left foot, and so you're always sort of, I think you sort of lose something in that action, not least because it's easier for defenders to to block them. I think the ability to cut back onto your right foot then and then sort of swing the ball around the defenders into the box and make it dangerous is really quite undervalued, and I think would make a big difference for us there as well. And yeah, just to add to what you were saying, watching Hackbow this week, he looks really rangy. Like he and it's interesting, isn't it? Because like the players that we're sort of looking at in general are fairly big guys as a rule. I think with the exception of Rashida, the other guys are fairly big and fairly tall, and it's definitely a sort of different genre of player than you would have got 10 years ago in that sort of winger mold, which I found quite interesting. But talking about Rashida, we should move on. I'll talk about him now. So for those of you who don't know, Rashida is a Kosovan player. So he came through the youth system of a Kosovan team before going to Vitesse Arnhem, and then moving to Werder Bremen in 2018, where he's been ever since. Now, Rashida burst onto the scene that season, 2018-19, and a lot of people were raving about him. But then since then, he's sort of dropped off the radar a little bit. Partly, I think, because Bremen haven't had a particularly good time of it in the Bundesliga recently. This season, for example, they are still potential relegation candidates. It's all quite close at the bottom, and there could be the chance that they do end up going into the relegation playoff. So in that sense, I've been saying to Josh, I actually think these are the sorts of players we should be looking at. These players who have shown that they can do quite well, but have maybe muted in the last few seasons because of the clubs that they're at, and you can maybe get some value there. The other thing to say about Rashid in terms of a signing is that he's got international caps for Kosovo, so he would be no problem signing him in terms of the GBE rules. Rashid usually plays in either on the left or the right, so you've got that flexibility there in a 3-4-3 or a 4-2-3-1 in one of those wide positions. He's another player who really likes to come central a lot as well, which I think probably unites all of the players that we're looking at today. He's played 20 times in the Bundesliga this season. He's only picked up 2 goals and 5 assists, but I think in the 18-19 season he had something like seven goals and 9 assists, something like that. It was a lot higher figure. And one of the important things to note about this season is that he missed a good chunk of the first part of the season to 2 injuries. The first one was a knee injury, and the second one was a hamstring injury as well. And I'm sure that's impacted his performances this season as well. In terms of the data, his data over the last couple of seasons hasn't been particularly impressive, but that data for the season that I've been talking about a lot, the 18-19 season, is really impressive, and he's shown that he can do it really well. The thing that does stand out in all of his in all of the data for all of the seasons is his dribbling. So he puts up over 2 dribbles per 90 every season since he's been in the Bundesliga, but closer to 3 than 2 most of them, and he has a fairly good dribble success rate as well. So yeah, he's a player who's a very interesting player in terms of his ability to dribble. In terms of his dribbling, he is someone who I would probably describe as an athletic dribbler rather than an intelligent dribbler. Sometimes when I was watching him, it felt as though he's as interested as the audience to see what happens when he goes into a dribble, if that makes any sense. So he's one of these players who has a really great ability at getting out of problems just through his athleticism. And so it's almost like he goes in, he tries to go around one player, and then he'll come up against another defender, and then he'll try and go around them. And it felt to me more as though he was sort of working his way through it as he was coming across it. I said this to Josh as well before we started. He reminds me a lot of Jack Harrison, really. They both have quite compact bodies. They both have that level of athleticism, and I do think that Rashida is maybe a slightly better technical player than Harrison. And I also note with a level of irony the fact that we've criticized Harrison for some of his decision making at times, and I do think that Rashida does have problems with decision making as well. So perhaps Rashida could be seen as a sort of Harrison replacement, but with a right foot rather than a left foot, and maybe slightly better, so a slightly upgraded player. So I don't know whether or not that would figure into people's decision making in terms of him as an option. In terms of the defensive side of things, I actually really like him off the ball. I think he's got good energy, he's got good discipline, he likes to track back. I don't know if he likes to, but he certainly does it. His pressing technique could definitely be improved, but in terms of the movement, I think he would work in our system no problems. And he actually presses high, very, very similar to the way that Jack Harrison does as well. In the way that you see Harrison, pushing from the wide fullback into the striker, he does that really well, and so would fit probably into our system quite nice from that point of view. In terms of defensive transition, again, he's very good at tracking players deep, although I think his tackling is probably worse than Harrison. So he is either quite easy to dribble past in deep scenarios, or he'll give away fouls in those areas as well. And his positioning, I think, is good as well. I've said that his weakness is probably decision making, but I don't think that really extends to his sort of positioning on the field. I think he's quite an impressive, not impressive, but certainly above average reader of the game in that sense. So his movement would be great, and I think that's something that's important for anyone that you're looking at in terms of a player coming into a Bielsa team, where obviously the movement is very important. In terms of build up, so back on the ball now, in terms of the build up and the possession stuff, Rashida's passing is sometimes a bit off, and again, you marry that with his sometimes questionable decision making, and you probably argue there are probably better options out there in this regard. And I do think that maybe even Harrison is better in those sort of tight build-up phases than Nishitsu is. In terms of crossing, I think he's a decent crosser, actually. He's a decent crosser with his right, and he's passable with his left, although I did note that his left foot crossing is a bit flatter and much less accurate than his right foot crossing. But he is able to go down on the outside and hit the byline on the left-hand side and get crosses in. So much as Josh was saying before, he wouldn't be a worry in that respect. If we were going to play him on the left, he's still going to be able to get to the byline and create stuff from there. And then the other things that I've noted are the one, he's again, like a lot of the players that we've talked about, he's got a level of flexibility and adaptability. He likes to come inside. He can play right side, left side. He could probably play him again in the center, although maybe his pressing might not be up for him playing it as an 8 in our system. And then in terms of creativity, I've noted down that his creativity is mainly coming from dribbling, but he's also quite a good goal scorer. So he's when he does get one-on-one with keepers, he's quite a dangerous player in that respect as well, which I think he's certainly better than Harrison in that regard as well. So I think that pretty much does it for me on Rashida. Joe, you were telling us that you wrote about Rashida for the Scouted Handbook a few years back, but I've completely forgotten about it. But no doubt you've revised and had a look back at what you wrote. So I'm interested in what your take is on Rashida.
Yeah, so I mean, Rashida was somebody who obviously in that 18-19 season, with a slash in the middle between the 18 and the 19, that he was just somebody who was fantastic for Werder. And towards the end of that season, there was rumours about him potentially going to Bayern Munich. I remember, I think there was some about him potentially going to Bayer Leverkusen. It was very much understood that he would leave, but he's still there. And if you told me this time 2 years ago that Rashida would still be at Werder, I'd be very surprised. But he does seem to have sort of plateaued in a sense, but I don't think that's entirely his fault. Werder have been, last year they were pretty abject. I don't know how they survived the relegation. And this season, I can't say I've watched very much of them, but it's with Florian Kohfeldt still the manager there. So I guess that it's very much the same. I was having a scan of the profile that I wrote, and I'm really, really disappointed that I didn't describe him as a Tasmanian devil, because that is very much what he is like. He's just he's all pace, he's all energy, he's all speed. He's very, very direct. I think, one thing that I did actually quite like about him was that he has no hesitancy when it comes to shooting. So he could be played through, and it wouldn't be am I going to hit this with my left, with my right? Am I going to chop back? It would just simply be, I'm going to hit this as hard as I can, hard and low, try and hit the target. And I think that was kind of the secret of why he was so good in that 18-19 season. I do think he did overperform his XG, but you put him in a more attacking team, and that might change. He might convert a lot more chances because he's getting them, as opposed to Werder. The defensive aspect, I think it was something which I noticed a couple of years ago when I wrote that. But I think by the sounds of it, he's very much refined that. He was, as you said, his pressing technique was, all stations go, and it was very easy to bypass him. It was less coordinated than you'd perhaps get with someone in this Leeds team. And I'd say, just in summary, he is an exciting player, but at the same time, if you're that way inclined to be frustrated by the occasional things that Alioski does, then you will also be frustrated by a lot of the things that Milot Rashica does. So that's in summary of going over my notes. That is essentially what came back to mind.
And Josh, you're a person who has been frustrated by Jack Harrison as well, and so me describing the overlap between the two of them, I wonder whether or not that makes you maybe a little bit more hesitant about the idea of Rashica.
There are times where I've described the partnership of Harrison and Alioski as the left side of death, but they've got, to be fair to both of them, they've done really well this season, as much as I've had my issues with Alioski, and we know that he's basically going to get replaced. But my feelings about Rashica, I don't have lots to add, but something that I noticed, I wrote down that he has really sort of fluid movements. I think he's quite wriggly. I was watching watching Phil Foden last night for Man City against Villa, and I mean, he was unbelievable the way he would just just wriggle through when you thought there's no way that he can get past here, and Matty Cash had no idea what was going on. But I feel that I see some of that in his movements of his, just the way he moves his body. I think he can get through when you don't think he can, and his ball striking as well. I just think that he can generate an awful lot of power on the ball. I think he's probably I think all of these players can hit the ball hard, but he looks like he shouldn't be able to hit the ball as hard as he can. I think that's the thing that stands out to me. But yeah, that does result in him taking some shots where you're going, why have you taken that shot?
We've had a few questions, so I feel duty bound to put them up. So Claudio is here, and he says, I'll probably get flack for this, and yes, you definitely will, but a Chilean can dream, right? But how about Alexis Sanchez? Inter's looking at selling him this summer, apparently. John H says, do you want to help players pay his wages, Claudio? And Claudio says he'll start a GoFundMe. And then Claudia says, but in all seriousness, the player John is talking about reminds me of how Sanchez plays. If that's the case, I'm all for it. I think Leeds is missing a winger that's a little more technical in small spaces. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely comparisons between the two, I think, especially when it comes to decision making and it being poor. But yeah, Jack Dart says, talk about ASM, cowards. Yeah, Joe's going to hide away when we talk about San Maximan. But we did have a question as well from Kane, who says, which of the four do you feel would fit best with previous left back picks? Which I think is really interesting. I was thinking about that.
Good point.
Actually now, just in terms of, if you talked about the left side of death, but obviously if we don't have Alioski playing as a left back next season, then it will change the way that we think about that position a lot, I think. So did you have any quick thoughts on that, Josh, before we move on? Yeah,
I mean, to be honest, I think they would all do well in that. I quite like, so on the right you obviously have Ayling gets so high up. I don't think Alioski gets in the box as much as Ayling, although he takes more shots, I think. I mean, that's anecdotal rather than actually being, I didn't just check that, but to my mind Alioski takes more shots, whereas Ayling gets into the box more and tries to cross it. But I wonder if you've got a player coming inside a bit, then you've got that. It creates a bit more space for the left back. In our case, we've bought Perrault. If he goes down the left, and he can actually get higher up the pitch a little bit more. Whereas I think Harrison is he's often in that space because he stays so wide.
Yeah,
but obviously there are underlapping runs that Alioski makes as well, so that is also possible.
So much of this the question about this that interests me is the fact that we've talked so long about the way that Leeds play in terms of the ideal way of playing, but I don't think we do that so much anymore. I do think we still build up mainly down the right hand side, but we obviously are much more direct as a team. And I think that probably changes things as well. And this comes back to the big question that we always talk about, which is, does Bielsa want to get back to the ideal, or is he going to change the sort of way that the team plays in the Premier League and just accept that he can't play that ideal way going forward? But I think we could talk about this all night. So let's move on to the final player in our list, who is Arnar Danjuma at Bournemouth. Josh, you wanted to talk about him?
Yeah. So he's playing for Bournemouth at the moment in the Championship. He's 24. He is another Dutchman. They signed him from Club Brugge in 2019. This season, he's got 17 goals and 7 assists from. I think he's got only around. So I wrote this down that he had 8.07 xG, but that was before last night when he had a couple of big chances. So I'm sure that's gone up a bit. That's 0.53 xG per 90, and he's putting up 0.18 XA per 90. So his numbers are high. That 0.53 xG from a winger, that's super impressive. So he is a goal scorer more than anything else. So he plays more on the last man than any of these other players. He stays high and wide, a little bit more like Harrison. So perhaps in that way he could be a bit more like taking that position, not changing the way that he plays it that much, but essentially having a right foot. But he's still able to take shots on his left as well. So he will cut inside on his right most of the time. That's what he prefers. And he prefers to open his body up side foot into the far corner. But he's not afraid at all of just burning the fullback on the outside and trying to shoot with his left. It's a bit more wild, his shooting with his left. And sometimes he'll basically just leather it at the near post with his left foot, but that's still been pretty successful this season. He's got a stocky build, probably more so than any of these others. So I think Kent's quite slim. Hackbow he's got the sort of the powerful frame. But yeah, Danjuma's a bit more short and stocky, but I think that gives him a bit of added physicality when he dribbles. I think he's hard to knock off the ball. I don't think he's as skillful a dribbler as any of these others, but he is still really capable of taking players on. Great goal that he scored last week against Norwich, where he cut inside with a lovely bit of skill against Max Aarons, beat another player inside and then shot back across himself into the top corner. It was a ridiculous finish, to be honest. I didn't really see how he could get the power on it that he could coming back across his body. But yeah, go out of your way to watch that goal if you haven't, because it's really, really good. So he can take the ball inside to create, but he doesn't do that as often. I think when he comes inside, he's coming inside to shoot, whereas I think these other guys you would also see them come inside and play little through balls in between the fullback and the centre back for, in our case, Bamford to run onto it and score. I don't think you would see him do that as much. I think he presses really well. But Bournemouth are not a very pressy team. So I think it would be pressing well for Bournemouth and pressing well for Leeds are a very different thing. So I think it would be something for him to adjust to, perhaps more so than these others. I think they would find it a bit easier. And I've got a note on his attitude. So he's mega confident. He's on record as saying that he thinks he's the best striker from Holland, basically. Which is it. They've got some players. they've got some players. So he's an extremely confident guy. And being that he's 24 and playing in the Championship, I would say that's quite a bold claim. Might be a bit misguided, but I do really like him a lot. But I think that says something about him. But he is proving himself, and I feel like in this time where Bournemouth are charging up the table again when they fell out of the playoffs earlier in the season, he's been the star man in the last couple of months. He's the reason why they're the form team coming into the end of the season. So I think I like that. I think the two players that I've talked about, they're players that really take responsibility for their teams, and that's something that I like a lot. I think Leeds need more players that will sort of take responsibility in attack, as I feel like it's kind of, we had Pablo Hernandez took responsibility. Got Rafinha, who takes responsibility to make things happen, and when he's not there, sometimes I think, who's going to make something happen? I think he could do that, although it would probably be more like he's the one who's going to take a chance, perhaps, rather than he's the one that's going to create. So that might not be the right, quite the right thing, but yeah, I like him.
Well, he's probably the best Dutch striker in Bournemouth, right? So we'll give him that. I'll hand this over to you, Joe. What do you make of Danjuma from what you've seen of him?
I mean, I think he's the best Dutch striker in Dorset. So just widen the parameters a bit. I mean, I can't say that I've watched any Bournemouth games this season, but sort of going back through Danjuma's clips, the first thing that is apparent is that he is a very confident player. There's very much in the same way that Rashida doesn't really hesitate when it comes to taking his shots on. There doesn't seem to be any hesitancy there when Danjuma is going in, and that the side-footed one which he puts to the left-hand side of the goalkeeper on the far post. That's quite a good finish. I like that. I think if Cody Hackbow is the player who sort of hits one from maybe a little bit further out and to the top corner, then Danjuma is the one who is a little bit further in, but to the bottom corner. I quite like how he probably would always be thinking to join the forward line as an auxiliary wide striker, essentially. I think he's a finisher, not a creator. And I think it depends what the focus is, because, I mean, in terms of his dribbling, I know what you mean in the sense that, he's probably the weakest out of these four. That makes me think, is it going to be a bit easy to show him down the line and sort of very much negate the threats that Leeds could have on that side? Because, we've seen the crosses that Jack Harrison's put in for Rodrigo, for Patrick Bamford this season, when he kind of takes it from the switch, takes it on the touch, goes all the way down to the to the byline, and then he crosses it sort of at the last moment. I think it was the one for Rodrigo against Newcastle. That was the one which really stood out to me, but there've been a few others, and a few others which haven't gone in. I'd like to think that he'd be able to do that, but I think that when he receives that ball, his immediate thought is going to be to come inside to try and find that shot. I do think that in terms of in a forward line, he could probably double up with Bamford and is more of a striker than Kent and than Rashida. I think it's one of the other things that I quite liked about Hackbow is that he's got that about him. I think, honestly, based on what you said, there's not a great deal more that I think I could add. Really, it's just that he's very he just seems very confident. I don't want him coming in and upsetting the apple cart at Humility FC, do you?
I mean, that's a fair thing to say, because there definitely don't seem to be any egos, and I think, I mean, I'm not basing that on lots that I know about him, but that's a pretty big claim to make, isn't it? To say that you're the best Dutch striker.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add on Danjuma is that I think he's quite good in build-up play. I think his link-up play with players is pretty decent. Maybe slightly better than some of the other players I looked at. Maybe not Kent, but certainly better than Rashid in that sense. Probably not Hackbow either. But I did like his interchange between his teammates in wide areas as well, which I think is important for the way that Leeds are hoping to play in the next season. Right, I'm conscious of time, so Josh, did you want to talk a little bit about the honourable mentions? Actually, before that, if any of you guys have got anything to say about any of these options that you might pick, do get in touch in the chat. But yeah, Josh, what about the honourable mentions that we have?
Yeah, so we have got. I'm just scrolling back up to who I wrote. So Dan James, pretty obvious one, because we've just been linked with him so many times. For Man United, I think people have maybe forgotten that he was at his best when he was a player playing on the left and able to drive down the line with his right foot, and then maybe come in at the last minute and shoot, or cut back from the byline. And he is a great presser, so I think he would fit. And I think we know we're basically going to be linked with him again this summer, because that just doesn't go away. If we ever sign him, I won't be surprised, even though perhaps he won't. He's not as exciting attacking wise, apart from being ridiculously quick, as some of these other ones. Todd Cantwell was another one we were linked with back in the summer. I've watched him lots for Norwich this season, and I think at the time when we were linked with him, I wasn't very excited about that link, and still now I think someone that drifts inside lots, so he definitely ticks that box. And Norwich are pretty pressy, so I think he would fit in the pressing, but there's just something about him that just doesn't quite do it for me. I wouldn't say no like if we signed him, but I would think, couldn't we have gone for somebody else who was a little bit more exciting. And then the other one that a few people asked us about, so that's why I've put him on here, is Ademola Lookman. He's playing at Fulham at the moment, but I think we can completely rule him out because he is owned by RB Leipzig, and there is no way that RB Leipzig are doing deals with Leeds United anytime soon after the Jean-Kevin Augustin incident.
I did have one honourable mention. My mate Tom, he's technically not in this position whatsoever, but he wanted to lambast me for not suggesting Ryan Gold at any point in previous episodes. And to be fair, I'm a fan of Ryan Gold, but I don't think he's Leeds quality, unfortunately. So there you are, Tom. You've had to wait an hour and 3 minutes, but there it is.
I thought you were recommending your mate Tom to play for Leeds, to be honest.
Hey, you never know.
Yeah, well, thank you for everyone who's got in touch in the chat. We've had a lot. Chris Kirk says Lookman, K Meacock says, I think Kent offers the most, but do I rate him much higher than the others? Probably not. Kane is going for Gakpo. Bradley Stead says Kent. Jack Dot says 6 months of Eddie Nketiah, which is interesting. And K Meacock again says, I would love Dan James. Edward Atherton says Cody Hackbow's ability to play 9 is huge. Sooner or later, we're going to have to have cover for Pat Bamford and a long-term replacement. I was hoping Rodrigo could play that role, but not to date. But it falls to us the responsibility to actually pick one of these players. So I'm going to throw up the price list from 5 yards. We've got Ryan Kent 19 mil, Cody Hackbow 21 mil, Rashid 21 mil, and then Danjuma 17 mil. So these guys are all pretty much valued the same. So I think it's pretty much a flat race to the line. So who wants to go first in terms of their list? I think you did it last time, Joe. So let's go with you, Josh. What's your 4-to-1 list of these players?
I'm going Rashid 4th, Danjuma 3rd. It's a tough one. I'm going Hackbow will be 2nd for me. I do love the fact that he could play as a striker. I think that is a huge tick for him. But Kent is a player that gets me off my seat, and I would just love to have him in our team. But maybe that's my heart rule in my head on that one. But Kent's number 1 for me.
I've got a feeling that this is going to go the other way for Joe. So, yeah, Joe, what's your 4-to-1?
Yeah, I'm probably going to go with Rashid's 4th, purely because I just don't think the link up, the build up would be good enough. And having sort of plateaued for 2 years, had injuries, the hamstring injuries are one for me, which I think when you rely on your speed an awful lot and you're only 24, I'm getting flashbacks of Michael Owen here, and nobody wants nor deserves that. So he'd be 4th. I'd go with Danjuma 3rd on the basis that I think it's one thing to do it very well in the Championship, and he has done very well, but he's not screaming Emi Buendia vibes to me from the Championship. I think he's playing in a team who are very attacking. They do a lot of attacking, but would that translate? I'm not so sure. 2nd, I'm going to go with Ryan Kent because I have to go with my pick. I have to go with Cody Hackbow for the
John's like, I've got to make a decision. I've got to decide.
This is horrible.
Deciding vote.
This is horrible.
I think whenever I'm playing Football Manager, I'm always going for the player who can play in 2 positions because it just saves you money at the end of the day. And when you're Oxford or Scunthorpe, you're on a shoestring budget. It makes all the difference. But yeah, I'm going to go with Hackbow because I think that dual ability would be very useful in reserve. I think that his frame, the fact that he's really put on some real mass and hasn't lost a little bit of speed at all. I think that he has the ability to play with his back, even when he's even when he's playing as the left-sided attacker. I think that his ability to receive between lines, to sit in that half space on the left-hand side, as well as potentially receiving those high balls from Calvin, from Luke Ayling on the other side, I think it gives you good balance to the opposite side, with Rafinha cutting inside as well. So yeah, I'm going to go with Gakpo because I think he just trumps Kent in the physicality and the dual ability.
Well, you guys have really thrown me under the bus here, haven't you? I can see both sides of the arguments. I like both players a lot. I do think they are quite different. What I think Ryan Kent has going for him is that Marcelo Bielsa likes him and has wanted to get him before. And I think that probably means that he's the more likely player that we will sign. But then this isn't about what's the most likely player that we're going to sign. It's about which player would suit us the best. And so, yeah, I don't know. This is really tough. I feel as though I'm going to make a bad decision either way, because I'm going to have to end up favouring one or the other. But I just don't think Josh will ever talk to me again if I don't choose Ryan Kent. So on that basis, I think I'm going to go for Kent, but I would be perfectly happy with both of these players. I think they both offer good things to Leeds, albeit in different ways. And yeah, it's literally a coin toss for me between the two of them. But I'm going to go for Ryan Kent just because of what I've said. Because Marcelo Bielsa has said that he likes him, and so that makes him maybe the slightly more obvious pick here. So yeah, Josh will sort that out tomorrow when the 5 yards market opens, and he'll buy that, and we'll keep you guys up to date with the values of these players that we bought. We should say that we are going to run another episode in this series in 2 weeks' time, doing Q&A stuff. So lots of you have had questions about various things, mainly things like Leif Davis and Alfie McCalmont. But this is going to be a chance for you guys to give us questions that you have about the players that we talked about and the transfer strategy in general. So we'll be doing that again in 2 weeks' time. Do get your questions in for that. We'll no doubt put tweets out about that closer to the time. But that brings us to the end of this week's episode of Orta's List. We'll be back in 2 weeks, as I've said. But until then, if you're interested in finding out more about 5 Yards, why not check out their website? Go to 5yards.link/ASAW, and you'll be able to find out everything there. And so all that remains for me to do is to say thank you, Joe. It's been great having you on this series. I think you'll be back for the Q&A, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'll be back for that. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure to come on. I'm really, really honoured to be welcomed, to be invited. But yeah, it's been fun. I like to scout players in my spare time. So naturally, this was something which aligned pretty well. And doing it, combining it with the stuff that we're doing at Leeds Live, it helps in terms of sort of when I'm trying to sound informed over there in terms of which players. Because I get to sort of bounce the ideas off you guys first. So yeah, it's all been really enjoyable. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, and as always, do check out the stuff that Scouted Football are putting out. Joe runs their podcast, which is excellent. You should really listen to. And there is also the wonderful handbooks that they put out as well. So check those out. I can't remember their handle. It's at Scouted Football. Is that right?
At Scouted FTBL. We did have a suspended account, which was at Scouted Football back. Well, it must have been 5 or 6 years ago now. So it's at Scouted FTBL.
Did you share one too many compilations?
No, it wasn't compilations. No, it was something else separate. But it was
controversy.
It was a rights issue, I think, is probably what we could put it down to. Yeah.
And Josh, as always, it's been great having you on. It's nice for you to show your face. Obviously, that's the only time you ever do come on our stuff these days, if you get the chance to show your face. But it's still a pleasure having you on all the same.
Hey, I did some writing the other day.
You did, and you guys should check that out. That's a scouting profile of Callum Stiles of Barnsley, who is a player who both Josh and I really like, and that also fits in with the piece that I put out this week, which is about how Leeds should plan for the future. So head over to our Medium and we'll search for Medium and All Stats Aren't We, and it should come up. You can have a read of those pieces. But I'm aware of time running on, so it's been great to run these series together. I've really appreciated chatting to you guys. Like I say, we'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with a Q&A anyway, so it's not over yet. But all that remains for me to do is to say good night and goodbye, everyone.